All right, let's talk about Dietrich Bonhoeffer. He's one of the most challenging and I think important theologians of the last century. His life and his work, they just continue to provoke Christians all over the world, forcing us to ask some of the hardest possible questions about what we really believe. So, who was this guy? Seriously, was he a pastor leading an underground seminary? A spy plotting to take down Hitler? A brilliant theologian whose ideas we're still wrestling with? Or a martyr, executed just weeks before the war ended? The thing is, he was all of them. It's why someone once said that Bonhoeffer is like a Rorschach test for theology. Everybody seems to see what they want to see in him. So, yeah, let's dive into this complex figure. So here's how we're going to break it down. We're going to walk through his incredible journey in 6 parts. We'll trace his life from a comfortable scholar to a political conspirator, watch how his theology was forged in the fire, and then, and this is the important part, ask what his radical witness means for our ministry, right here, right now. Okay, first up, we have to tackle this central puzzle. You see, Bonhoeffer has been claimed by just about everyone, liberals, conservatives, activists, you name it. But the truth is, he doesn't really fit comfortably in any of their boxes. It's so clear that any attempt to sort of tame Bonhoeffer, to make him safe or fit him into a neat little theological box just completely misses the point. His legacy isn't about giving us easy answers. It's about pushing us, challenging us, and forcing us to ask the uncomfortable questions. So how did a person like this come to be? Let's take a look at his early life and zero in on the key moments that yanked his theology out of the ivory tower and dropped it right into the chaos of the real world. You have to understand, Bonhoeffer was born into Germany's absolute elite. I mean, his father was a famous psychiatrist, the family was cultured, academic. His future looked set. He was on the fast track to becoming a brilliant professor. But his life was on a collision course with one of the biggest crises in human history. And this quote? This marks the moment everything changed for him. While he was studying in New York, he started attending the Abyssinian Baptist Church in Harlem. He was blown away by their vibrant faith. And through a friendship with an African-American student named Frank Fisher, he saw the brutal reality of racism up close. And that experience just forced him to face the social demands of the gospel. It wasn't about abstract ideas anymore. It was about real people, real suffering, real life. So when Bonhoeffer returns to Germany, a Germany that is falling deeper and deeper under the shadow of Nazism, this new, reality-based faith gets put to the ultimate test. He was forced to confront the one question that would define his entire life. What does it actually mean to follow Christ when it could cost you everything? He saw what was happening. He recognized it as a status confessionis, basically a moment of truth, a line in the sand moment where the church could not stay quiet or neutral anymore. It had to choose. So, in response, he helped create the Pastors' Emergency League, which grew into the Confessing Church, a group of believers who boldly declared that their first allegiance was to Jesus Christ and not to Adolf Hitler. Now, this is absolutely key to understanding his thinking. In his famous book, Discipleship, he diagnosed the problem with the German church. He said they were handing out cheap grace. You know, a feel-good forgiveness that doesn't demand any change, a faith that costs you nothing. But the gospel, Bonhoeffer insisted, calls us to costly grace. It's the kind of grace that costs us our entire lives, because it's the treasure in the field, the pearl of great price that is worth selling everything to have. All right, so this is where things get really intense. How does a man so committed to the Sermon on the Mount, to peace and love, end up as a conspirator in a plot to assassinate a dictator? It's here that we see his theology of a worldly faith in action. Just look at this incredible double life. On the one hand, he's leading a secret seminary, a deep community of prayer and scripture that he wrote about in his beautiful book, Life Together. At the same time, he's a double agent for military intelligence, actively resisting the Nazis, smuggling Jews to safety, and writing his book Ethics about what it means to live responsibly in a broken world. For him, these weren't opposites. No way. They were two sides of the very same coin of what it meant to faithfully follow Jesus in the world as it is. So what's the theological key that unlocks all this? Well, it's a concept from his very first book, Stellvertretung. It's a big German word, but the idea is simple. It means vicarious representative action. It's the idea of standing in for someone else, taking on their burden. You see, Christ is the ultimate representative for all of humanity. And because of that, the church is now called to be the representative for the world, to take on its suffering, even its guilt. That conviction is what drove him to do what he did. But eventually, his double life caught up with him. In April 1943, the Gestapo arrested him. He was thrown in prison.
And it was from that prison cell, in his famous Letters and Papers from Prison, that Bonhoeffer gave us his final, his most radical, and maybe his most powerful thoughts.
This was the question that haunted him, that just kept him up at night in his cell. He was wrestling with what faith looks like in what he called a world come of age, a modern world that thinks it's grown up, a world that believes it can get along just fine without God. How do you talk about God in a world that doesn't think it needs him? And his answer just completely flips the script on how we often think about faith. He totally rejected any kind of faith that tries to escape the world. Instead, he called for a deep this-worldliness. He said we don't find faith by running away from life's problems and duties, we find it by diving right into them, by throwing ourselves completely into the arms of a God who is right there, suffering with us. And this is the most crucial point. He says that in a world full of pain, when we feel powerless, a big, omnipotent God who just fixes problems from a distance is actually no help at all. The only God who can truly help us is the God who gets down in the mud with us, the one who joins us in our suffering, the weak, powerless God we meet in Jesus on the cross. That is the God who is with us when we are at our weakest. So, what do we do with all this? What's the legacy of this German pastor executed by the Nazis? What does he have to say to us today as we prepare for ministry in our own unique context? See, Bonhoeffer doesn't leave us a neat system of theology. He leaves us a challenge, and it's a challenge that is incredibly relevant for ministry right here in Nigeria. He challenges us to see our society from below, from the viewpoint of the poor, the marginalized, those displaced by conflict. He calls the church to stop existing for itself, for its own power and buildings, but to be the church for others. He demands that we speak up for the voiceless when we see injustice or corruption. And he reminds us that Christ isn't just found inside our church walls on Sunday morning, but in the messy, complicated, beautiful center of our ordinary, everyday lives. And so he leaves us with this final, unavoidable question. He forces us to look around at our own communities, our nation, our own lives, and ask, what does cheap grace look like right here? And what would it really mean to embrace a costly discipleship? What does faith in a suffering God, a faith that is lived for others, demand of us as leaders in the Nigerian church today? That is the challenge of Dietrich Bonhoeffer.